All right, let's dive into one of history's darkest and honestly most fascinating subjects, poison. Now, this isn't just a story about death. Nope. It's a story of power, of paranoia, of science, and survival, stretching all the way from the very first hunter's dart right up to the modern laboratory. So let's get on the same page. What exactly is a poison? Well, the definition is pretty simple. It's any substance that messes with life on a chemical level. A simple concept, right? But this simple idea has been this incredibly powerful force, shaping human history in ways you might not even expect. But this is the real question we're going to get into. Is poison just a killer, or is it something more? As we're about to see, throughout our history, it has been all three of these things. A weapon, for sure, but also a medicine and an absolutely indispensable tool. Our story starts way, way before kings and assassins. We have to go back to the earliest humans, who were just looking for any edge they could get in the raw struggle for survival.
I mean, think about it. Archaeological evidence shows that our ancestors weren't just relying on sharp sticks. They were chemists. Look at the grooves that were carved into ancient spearheads. Those weren't for decoration. No way. They were little reservoirs for deadly toxins, potent enough to take down an animal way bigger and faster than any single hunter.
But here's the thing. This knowledge was power, and it was not shared freely. The secrets of which plants could kill and which ones could heal, well, that was closely guarded stuff, kept by tribal leaders or shamans. This command over life and death, it created this whole aura of mystique and probably formed the very foundation of the witch doctor or the medicine man. So, as societies got bigger and more complex, poison moved out of the wilderness and right into the heart of civilization. We're going to jump forward now to a time when it became the weapon of choice in the halls of power, ancient Rome. By 331 BC, poisoning was just rampant in Rome. I mean, it was the perfect crime, really. It was silent, it was effective, and it was ideal for settling a score, grabbing an inheritance, or just getting rid of a political rival. And it wasn't just for the rich and powerful. It was used by every social class, a truly democratic way to murder someone. And you can see this whole dynamic perfectly in the story of two emperors. On one side, you've got Claudius, the victim, who was likely murdered by his own wife with a plate of poisoned mushrooms. And then you have his successor, Nero, who became the user. He was a notorious poisoner himself, even hired a specialist, and apparently preferred cyanide to take care of his own family members. And hey, this wasn't just a Roman thing. Around the same time, over in ancient India, a political advisor named Kautilya was openly, recommending poison as a legitimate tool of the state. He wrote about using it for political gain and even laid out these elaborate plans to protect the emperor from being poisoned himself, like using food tasters. So, as the art of poisoning got more and more sophisticated, it kicked off a kind of arms race. An equally intense effort got started on the other side of the problem, the desperate, desperate search for an antidote. And maybe the most famous early figure in this search was a guy named King Mithridates VI. This king was so terrified of being poisoned that he basically became one of history's first toxicologists. He tested poisons on condemned criminals and, get this, in a super risky move, he took tiny daily doses himself, trying to build up immunity. His life's work resulted in a so-called universal antidote, Mithridateum, which was this complex cocktail of dozens and dozens of herbal remedies. And this search, it was happening all over the world. Even before Mithridates, the Indian surgeon Susruta was writing down remedies for slow poisoning. Then, centuries later, the Persian physician Rhazes would actually turn a poison into a cure, using a mercury-based antiseptic to treat scabies. You can literally see the dark art slowly, painstakingly, starting to give way to actual science. Which brings us to today, and our relationship with poison right now is more complex and more widespread than it has ever been. It's a real paradox. And here's what that paradox looks like. While, political assassinations with poison are pretty rare, accidental poisoning is now the fourth most common cause of death among young people. The threat has totally shifted from the assassin's hidden vial to the everyday chemicals that are under our sinks and in our medicine cabinets. The biggest change, though, is just the sheer scale. We now make and use poisons on an industrial level, mostly as pesticides. Since 1950, our use has just skyrocketed to about 2.5 million tons every single year. That's a number our ancestors could never have even imagined. But There is some good news here. That scientific quest that King Mithridates started all those centuries ago has absolutely flourished. For many of the most common and dangerous poisons we face today, we have developed specific, highly effective antidotes, from things like naloxone for opioid overdoses to life-saving treatments for cyanide poisoning.
So as we start to wrap this up, let's just look at poison's legacy, how the oldest traditions are still around right alongside the most modern, cutting-edge threats.
It's pretty incredible, but in some parts of the world, poison is still used in its most ancient form. You've got indigenous hunters in Africa, South America, and Asia who still apply toxins to their darts and arrows. That is a living, breathing link to the practices of our Stone Age ancestors. Yet, at the exact same time, poison is still the weapon of choice for the most sophisticated, state-level assassinations. The 2006 murder of Alexander Litvinenko using polonium-210, a rare, incredibly lethal, and pretty much untraceable radioactive isotope, is all the proof you need that the ghost of the Roman poisoner is still very much with us. And that really leaves us with a final, kind of chilling question. We've become brilliant at understanding the chemistry of poison, at creating antidotes. But can we ever truly find a cure for the human impulses? The fear, the greed, the ambition that makes someone a poisoner in the first place? It seems like the story of poison is, and probably always will be, the story of ourselves.